I'm burning more fat here than I am here. It's weird, isn't it? You've probably heard of this fat-burning heart rate zone, which is a rough window of intensity that you should be training at in order to be using fat for fuel, or burning fat. It's very misleading, as people often think that this means they're going to lose more fat overall by doing more work in this fat-burning heart rate zone. But this is where a little bit of knowledge can be a very dangerous thing when you don't have the complete picture of what's really going on. This came up on my Instagram just yesterday, and after seeing the response that I got from everybody, it seems that there's a lot of confusion here that needs to be clarified. Just because you burn more fat doesn't mean you're going to lose more fat overall. Let me explain. Your body can use both carbs and fat for fuel. It can technically use protein and ketones too, but that's a little bit more complicated and not something that's really relevant to today's discussion around fat burning. Your body will always use a combination of both fat and carbohydrates to fuel all of its daily activities. This includes weight training in the gym, cardiovascular training, and of course all the other ways that we expend energy outside of training. We typically think of that outside of training expenditure as fueling recovery from our workouts, but it also includes energy spent during day-to-day functions like digestion, the production of hormones, the general turnover of cells, and when we're asleep. In fact, when you're asleep, we're probably burning anywhere between 50 to 100 calories of energy per hour, or across an 8-hour night, that's about 400 to 800 calories, which isn't too far off how much energy we use when we're doing a typical weights or cardio training session for around an hour or so. But of course, laying in bed for 8 hours is very different to doing a hard weight session for an hour. So what's going on? As I mentioned earlier, your body will always use a combination of both fats and carbs to fuel those daily activities. The ratio or the percentage of which one it uses more will be dictated by the energy demand of the current activity. The numbers will vary a fair bit, but generally speaking, at rest, we're probably burning around 50% carbs and 50% fats. It's probably a little bit higher on the fat side though. We do this because we're able to bring oxygen into our body. And that's not just from breathing oxygen in, it's from breathing into the lungs and then going through gaseous exchange to go into the bloodstream, where it can then get transported to whatever cell may need it, such as a muscle cell in your left calf, or your right eyelid, or a cell within your pancreas, where it's then taken into that cell and into the mitochondria of that cell, where it can finally go through a series of biochemical reactions to help us produce energy. This is called aerobic metabolism. There's a lot of steps there, and as you'd expect, it's pretty slow. It's also relatively slower than going to another alternative, which would be your left calf muscle cell saying, hey, I need energy, and instead of waiting for oxygen to come around, I'm just going to pull this carbohydrate that I've got laying here as stored muscle glycogen. I'm going to break that up and use that for energy. That's much faster than waiting for oxygen. So when it comes to using fats or carbs as a fuel source, if we have a high energy demand, such as when we're doing a hard set in the gym or an all-out burst of some kind of activity, your body can't wait for the oxygen to get into the cells to create that energy. So instead it goes through carbohydrates, which is why at maximal intensities, we see close to zero fat burning to fuel that exertion. And this is where the whole fat burning zone thing came from, because there is a threshold where your body still can be burning a decent amount of fat for fuel to fuel that activity. It's a higher intensity than sitting on the couch, but a lower intensity than an all-out burst. From a heart rate zone perspective, it falls roughly in that zone 2 to zone 3-ish area, or around 60 to 70% of your max heart rate. The reason this exists as a thing is for endurance athletes to know roughly what zone they can train in for extended periods to build their aerobic base. Because once you start pushing more into higher intensities and your body goes to using more carbohydrates, you'll see a big drop-off in your endurance or the length of time at which you can sustain that intensity for. Because one thing I didn't mention about the carbohydrate burning earlier is that while it can be a quicker way for us to get energy right now, particularly when there's a high demand for it, we also have a limited supply of it. Not to mention, in order to fully metabolize or burn those carbohydrates, we do have to eventually bring oxygen back into the mix, which brings us right back to the same slow problem we were having with burning fat earlier with all those oxygen steps. So for an endurance athlete, when they're trying to accrue more volume with their cardio workouts, it makes sense to devote a fair amount of time to doing more work at this fat-burning threshold, as it can be sustained for a longer period of time, as it's not dependent solely on carbohydrate metabolism for energy. The problem with this is that a lot of people have taken that to mean that you need to spend more time in this fat-burning zone if you want to be losing fat, and you'll turn your body into this fat-burning machine and get leaner. But it's not true. because that workout only makes up a small percentage of your overall energy burn for the day, even if you did multiple workouts in that day. Because both within and outside of your workout, your body's going to be burning a combination of carbs and fats. So if you burned more fat during that fat-burning exercise, it means you preserved muscle glycogen or didn't burn as much carbohydrates. Which means when it comes to fueling those everyday functions outside of your workout, your body can still go to them, which it will do. Which means, yes, you burned more fat and less carbs within that workout in the fat-burning zone, but you'll burn less fat and more carbs outside of the workout. It all balances out. It might be worth rewatching that bit again just to make sure it sets in properly, because so many people get confused by it, and it doesn't help that a lot of influencers and companies out there continue to spread misleading information around this topic that push forward the idea of doing more fat-burning exercise to get you leaner. While I have your attention as well, please do subscribe to the channel and hit the thumbs up on this video if you haven't already. I was looking over my analytics the other day, and it turns out that less than half of the people who watch my videos aren't subscribed to this channel, which is great because it means that this content is being shared across the YouTube platform a lot more, but it also means that many of you are missing out on a lot of content that I do share, which is not great. You don't have to hit the bell for notifications, but just tap that subscription button. It goes a very long way to growing this platform larger and larger, which helps me create more free content for you. Anyway, to get back on track. So if burning more fat during exercise means you're probably going to be burning less fat outside of exercise, how do we lose fat ultimately? Well, it comes back to that boring old equation you've probably all heard before, the energy balance equation, eating less calories than what you burn in a day. Let's make it a bit more interesting and on topic for you though. Hopefully this really drives things home for you in terms of understanding this whole concept. If I'm not eating less calories than I burn in a day, doing more of this fat-burning exercise will mean that I burn more fat, but I'm going to replace that with the food that I eat outside of the gym, so it doesn't make a difference. If, on the other hand, I was eating less calories than I burned in a day, and I did exercise that burned virtually zero fat for fuel, that means I was burning predominantly carbohydrates. Now, outside of the gym at rest, my body will have to replenish those carbohydrate stores. So it probably won't be using as much carbohydrates for energy and will use more fats for energy. And most importantly, if I'm not eating enough fat, carbohydrates, or overall calories to support this energy demand, it'll have to go to the stored energy on my body and I'll lose fat. So what's the main takeaway? Should we really care about what exercises or types of exercise burn more fat than another? No. This fat-burning zone isn't a bad thing, but we should be using it for its actual purpose, which is not to get you leaner, it's to build your aerobic base, if that's part of your goals. Personally, I think that should be part of everybody's goals, even if you're not an endurance athlete. But that's a topic for another video altogether. We shouldn't be using exercise for fat loss, in my opinion. Exercise, whether it's weight training or cardio training or other kinds of powerlifting or anything like that, these things should all be used to drive adaptations, like improving aerobic fitness, building muscle, getting stronger, and improving athletic performance. We should be using our diet to lose fat, and that's it. I'm not going to hijack this video with a full skill on how I like to structure dieting phases, but if you want a specific video on that, just let me know in the comment section below. In the meantime, you can also check out a bit of my recent fat loss period that I ran through by using the link up in the corner here. Alright, that's it for today guys. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to check out my programs or get your hands on some of my training gear to support this channel, use the links in the description below. You can also get a no obligation free trial to try out all of my programs for a variety of goals and experience levels, along with full access to my macro calculator, nutrition tracker, coaching and education. Just use those links below and I'll see you all next time.